Edward Snowden was on Joe Rogan, and there were many, many revelations. Hi, thanks for watching. Today, I just wanted to give you a highlight of the interview that Joe Rogan did with Edward Snowden. He was on today, and it's already well over 1 million views. It's incredible how well this video is doing. It's over 2.5 hours long, and if you don't have time for the entire video, I wanted to give you my highlights from that interview. And so I just picked 10 things that I found interesting. The first of which, not a huge national security issue, just that Edward Snowden was hesitant to go on Joe Rogan's show based on his first impression, and that was his logo, the spinning cartoon head with the third eye. He said, wow, I don't know about this guy. And that is an interesting thing to keep in mind. You know, often with first impressions, we don't know how other people are going to react to us, and sometimes those impressions will throw people off. I mean, if you've never seen one of my videos before and you tune in and you're like, who's this guy in the jungle with live flames on his desk? I'm not sure what that means. So that's an interesting thing to keep in mind for yourself, is first impressions do make a difference. Now let's get into the more serious things that Edward Snowden talked about in this interview. The second thing was that the evacuation of the NSA at 9/11 made a lasting impression on him. Now, he talked about this in his book, and he was doing some website development in a house, but the house was on a base. The base was right next to the NSA. When 9/11 happened, they decided to send everybody home. And that made a big impression on him because he thought, wow, in this time of need, our country needs all these people to look into this national event, and they're sending everybody home. That made a lasting impression on him, and that did change the course of his career. The third item of interest from this interview was when he talked about C theories or con theories. He had a job at the NSA, and he was looking for evidence of aliens and chemtrails and all these things. And he wanted to find them, and he had access to all the databases. And what he told Joe was that he was hoping to find information on aliens, but he was not able to. Doesn't mean that they don't exist, but he couldn't find any information that the government was hiding information on the aliens. And I thought that was kind of interesting. The fourth item of interest from this interview was the Protect America Act. This happened in 2007. I wasn't paying attention to anything in 2007, but what this act did is it retroactively immunized all the telecom companies from prosecution for breaking the law. What they were doing is they were handing over all the records of everyone to the government, and this was against the law, and so the government decided, you know what, we're just going to take care of that. We'll retroactively make all of that okay. I hadn't heard about that before, but perhaps you have. Well, that was pretty interesting little tidbit. The fifth item of interest was the term national security. Edward Snowden says that this changed during the Bush administration, that using the term national security is just an alternative to using the term state security. And that got me thinking, anytime you hear a politician talk about national security, substitute state security for that, and I think you may have a little better picture of what's going on. Now, the sixth item of interest from this interview was the classified and unclassified version of the warrantless wiretapping document. Usually, when the government declassifies something, right, they will go through with a black marker or whatever and just mark things out, and those are redacted. You can't see them. Edward Snowden, with his security clearance, he was able to see both the classified version and the declassified version. He said they were totally different documents. He said that the document was tailor-made to mislead and deceive. That's pretty bold. And yeah, very eye-opening to hear that claim. The seventh item of interest from this interview is he talked about the FBI and hashtag not all, right? Not all FBI agents and not all CIA agents and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But he said that the FBI classified Martin Luther King 2 days after his I Have a Dream speech as the greatest national security threat in the United States. That's really something to hear. I hadn't heard that before. I do want to fact check that, see if I can back that up. But that was quite a claim, and if true, that's a big deal. The eighth item of interest from the interview has to do with phone records. Now, we walk around with our phone all the time, and since 2008, with the Hemisphere Act, companies like AT&T keep the information of your cell phone so that anytime you're walking around town, different cell phone towers ping your phone. They have that information. They know where you were at certain times of the day. They have all of that information since 2008, and they're keeping it, and they turn it over to the government. Not only that, but AT&T, since 1987, has every phone call you've made through AT&T, or if you made a call to someone on an AT&T network, they have the information of that call. Who you called, what time they called, how long the call was for. They have all of that information, and they're keeping it. Now, the ninth revelation is not necessarily with this interview, but it's what happened while I was watching this interview. I was sitting at my desk in my office, at my desktop, and I had my phone on the table next to me, and something interesting happened. I'm going to recreate it right now. I am at 1 hour, 35 minutes, and 32 seconds into the podcast, and let's see what happens. I'm going to start the recording on my phone so we can see. Here we go.
Now people have OK Google, they have Siri on their phones, they're in their house. They've always got these connected microphones.
Now you can see he said a phrase, and my phone just popped up with the Google Assistant. I don't use the Google Assistant. It just did that automatically. I didn't know that my phone would do that when it heard that phrase. I've never used it in that way before. And this just tells me that my phone is listening all the time. And it's interesting that that happened during an interview with Edward Snowden. So that was a revelation for me. But the last thing in this interview that I found interesting, and there's way more than 10. Okay, I had to cut it off. But the 10th item of interest was when he talked about the Espionage Act. And Edward Snowden said that in the Espionage Act, there is no difference between taking classified information and selling it to your enemy. Right? A foreign government, to sell it to a foreign government is the same as taking that same information and giving it to a journalist. There's no difference between the two. And that was shocking. I would have thought that there would have been a different penalty for those two things. They seem different to me. But the fact that that is the current law of the land is kind of shocking. And I guess that's why he's over in Russia right now. So those were 10 items that I found interesting in the interview. if you'd like to see more, go check out Joe Rogan's interview with Edward Snowden. It is over 2.5 hours long, so these were just some highlights that I came up with, but I think it is a really important interview. I think Edward Snowden is a very important figure in the world today. I did review his book a couple of weeks ago. I recommend reading his book if you haven't done that. I'll leave a link in the description. But tell me, with these highlights, are you interested in checking out this interview with Joe Rogan or reading his book? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Peace.